All right, well, we'll call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Montgomery Selectboard. Today is Monday, June 16th. It is 6:32 p.m. First order of business, as always, is to review and make any changes to the agenda. Does anybody have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Nope, no, not on my end.
All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of the June 2nd meeting minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes as written?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Thanks, Dan. Is there a second?
One second.
We have a second from Suzanne. Is there any discussion on the minutes? All right, hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes of the June 2nd meeting as written, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries, and we've approved the minutes of the June 2nd meeting.
Can you just tell me? I see
Yes,
Roberta.
so we've got Roberta and Ed Deptula are on Zoom.
Okay.
Yep,
Thank you.
and we should be being joined, I imagine shortly, by at least a couple other people in relation to an item later on the agenda.
Do you feel like when I'm taking minutes, it's necessary to specify people that are in the room versus on Zoom?
I would note who's on Zoom versus in the room.
Okay.
I think it adds a little bit extra clarity in terms of participation, and if we ever decide to do anything that would require us to demonstrate that Zoom gets used, it would also be helpful just to say, hey, on average, we have this many people on Zoom. So,
Okay.
yeah. Cool. All right, so moving on, Public Works, municipal wastewater project update is item A. We're still getting easements back from folks. To date, there's only about 10 property owners that we have not heard anything from. A couple of those are abandoned properties, and a couple of them are just homeowners that we just don't know how to get in touch with, apparently, living out of state. So we'll continue to try to get hold of those folks. The next step is going to be to follow up with individuals on questions related to the easements that went out. That's kind of been the next step, which has been pending for at least 3 or 4 weeks at this point now. What has held us up on scheduling those site visits with the engineers has been the adoption or execution of Engineering Service Agreement Amendment 12. So you might remember in the past, we have the engineering service agreement with Hoyle Tanner for the wastewater project. Since we initially entered into that agreement back on January 7th of 2020, we've had to amend it to reflect changes in the scope of work or changes to the limits of the contract amount. This ESA amendment that we have before us is adding to the scope of work due to the unforeseen kind of volume of certain buckets of work that are being done, and it does bump the contract amount up as well. The buckets of work that we're looking at right now are 5, so this amendment pertains to additional work in obtaining individual property easements. So this is the coming back for site visits with individual property owners to go over where is the tank going to be, how does that work or not work with you, where is that pipe going to go, kind of the one-on-one customer service focused aspects of making sure that we get everything done to the best ability to meet everyone's needs. So this amendment covers the individual property easement work, both desk review and on-site, which we're trying to start scheduling this week. It also pertains to variances pursuant to the state of Vermont's indirect discharge rules. The indirect discharge rules have criteria for certain things like how far you have to be from a building, how far you have to be from a property line. Given the size of the properties in the center, almost half of these are in conflict with the indirect discharge rules, meaning that we have to get a variance from the state to get our indirect discharge permit.
What is it? An
Indirect discharge.
discharge?
Yeah, so the indirect discharge permit is essentially the permit to operate the wastewater recovery facility on 242.
Gotcha.
Part of that is these rules that have to do with the system itself. The ones in question that we're dealing with have to do with kind of exclusionary distances from buildings and property lines and things like that. Again, the properties are so small that over half of these properties wouldn't qualify. So we have been working with the state to get these variances and establish a framework for how it's going to work. This amendment includes additional work to kind of get that across the finish line. Additional work in this ESA amendment is related to requirements to apply for and get town permits. We've taken the stance with the project that even though the project is something the town is doing, we are going through all of the steps through zoning, et cetera, to get the required permits in place that any other project would have. So this amendment covers that scope of work. We've also run into some pretty extraordinary wetlands permitting mapping requirements the state has put in front of us. These are things that the engineering team has never seen before, so they're kind of new. And in talking with other folks at the state and in this world, they do seem to be kind of unusual. That being said, we have to follow them. So there's kind of an extra scope of work around wetlands mapping. And then the last bucket of work, number 5, is around soil boring and media testing. This is required by Department of Environmental Conservation to put together a soil management plan. That is something that was not included in the original scope of work, but has now become something we're going to need to do. Essentially what that is dealing with is any kind of soil or material that comes out of the ground during the scope of construction, we have to do something specific with in terms of treatment and disposal. So coming up with that soil management plan is an added step that we have to deal with. So this ESA amendment deals with those 5 criteria, those 5 buckets of work, I should say. It has been reviewed by DEC. That's kind of what has been taking us a while to get this in front of the board. We did get concurrence from DEC on Friday, so that's why it's before the board tonight. What this amendment does is it adds $151,849 to the engineering service agreement. That amount can be covered by the funding we have in place, either through the SRF loan that we've got or through the money that is coming through the reprogrammed ARPA bucket of funds that we've talked about. So again, this is money that is coming out of the project funds. It's not coming out of the general fund. It's not coming out of property tax revenue, any of that kind of stuff. Any questions on this amendment?
Yes. This is not so much on the amendment, actually. It's kind of backtracking to the what you said about the 10 easements that are remaining uncommunicated.
Yep.
What happens with the abandoned properties or any properties that you aren't able to get a hold of the landowners?
Yeah, so we've talked about this in the past, but essentially what happens is any property that we're unable to get in touch with the landowners on and or receive an easement from, those eventually will get batched and they will go before a judge and we'll say, look, we need these easements to do this project. The judge will review the project process, review the rationale for why we're coming to them, and make a determination as to whether the easements are necessary and proper given the scope of the project. And then the judge would essentially, if we prevailed, would award the town the easements.
So if we do gain those easements, they put the systems in place on that property. Are they able to tie into those houses?
Yeah, so they will be able to hook into the system because when they take the septic tank out, they will drop the new one in and connect it to the pipe.
Yeah.
They will not be immediately in use if the property is not in use.
Sure.
But they will be tied into the property. The property will be subject to the fee structures in the ordinance that's going to be created. Again, we haven't passed that or adopted yet, but the framework for that we're looking at is something similar to the water system where there'd be maybe a flat fee and then something on top of it based on usage. So the more you use, the more you pay.
Yeah.
So the properties would be subject to that just as they are subject to the water system.
And then is there any way, like I know there's a handful of properties that are abandoned and like we've been working towards a tax sale and not able to get a hold of the owners. Is there any way that this process could accelerate obtaining those properties so they can go to tax sale?
Yeah, so it's just totally speculation on my part, but I don't know if I don't think it would accelerate the process of going to tax sale because that is something that is in the collector of delinquent taxes realm, and we don't intersect with that.
Sure.
What I would hope is that having these properties connected to a municipal system may make them more appealing to somebody in terms of purchase and
Make them more saleable.
rehabilitation. Make them more saleable.
Totally.
because, coming into an abandoned property that has a lot of problems with it is going to be expensive. If one of those problems is not the wastewater system of the property,
Yeah.
it could be more appealing to somebody who wants to come and, invest in the property, whether it's a permanent resident or an investor or somebody.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So two follow-up questions there. One, do all 10 properties have confirmed septic systems? Or any parcels like without septic system?
as far as we know, all these properties have existing septic systems. They would have had to in order to function when they were there, and to our knowledge, they haven't gone anywhere.
Sure.
Now, whether or not there's an issue in the interior of the building or something else that gets at this, we don't know. That's where we're at.
And then is there an argument to be made that, or a case to be made rather, that it would, in the absence of having these 10 homeowners sign on to it, bypass them entirely, like leave a shut off, and then such that they could connect at the future at greater cost to the owner, to offset perhaps some of the costs of the project itself, like because it sounds like we also have $151,000 in new in expenses, right?
Yep.
So is there an argument to be made that these 10, instead of like,
Abandoned.
yeah, if they have been abandoned or like otherwise, like the town doesn't need to pay for all those septic systems to get plumbed in and like up to code, if all we need to do is get a shut off and move on to the folks that have signed up?
Yeah, so I think that the intent here is to get them hooked in and on so that they're included in the project, but also included in the user base, because even though they're not properties that would be
Gotcha.
functionally using it, they would, similar to the water system, there'd be a base fee. And so that base fee would then be attached to the property. And even if it's an abandoned property that's got nothing going on and they're not paying their property taxes, that would then still kind of get hitched to the property and paid when somebody was to take upon ownership. So we would still see revenue from it to support the system. And that's kind of the nugget of all of this, is that the economy of scale is required to make the overall financing of it, the operations and maintenance, work.
Did we get a petition from the former petitioners for an appeal after town meeting? Remember they had until the middle one?
No,
Okay.
we did not see an appeal for anything.
Okay, good to know.
Or a petition to reconsider.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
And it's unrelated. It just popped into my head. I know for the water system now, there's like for nonprofits, or I imagine like, for like nonprofit entities, there's a base rate sort of discount or like flat rate for them. Is there anything like that for
For the wastewater system?
wastewater system?
Could be. That's going to be part of the,
Ordinance.
the design of the ordinance. So,
All right.
yep. Yeah, right now with the ordinance, we've got kind of a framework that we've talked about with the state and the engineers and our attorney. We've just kind of paused moving anything forward on that until we can get kind of easements together and get this thing finally out to bid.
Okay.
Because that getting it to bid is still kind of the next big milestone here.
Yeah.
Because that's going to really be the make or break. Are the numbers we're looking at good? Are they real? Does this dog hunt, as my southern friends would say?
Okay. So anyways, right now we have to approve this amendment.
Yeah, so again, on the table is this engineering service amendment covering those 5 buckets of work in the amount of $151,849 added to the contractual amount. So if there's no other questions or discussion, I would ask if there's a motion to approve engineering service agreement amendment number 12 with Hoyle Tanner.
I'll make that motion.
Thanks, Suzanne. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thanks, Dan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries, and we approve the amendment. We'll get that back to them tomorrow morning, and that will kind of greenlight this next phase of work, scheduling these meetings with landowners, which is great, because that has been backed up for longer than it should have been at this point.
And has the audit gone through and the grant money and all that stuff?
Yeah, so this is down a little bit lower on
Okay.
the agenda, but I will just say that we did get the draft of the single audit back. Aaron was reviewing it today. It looks like everything should be okay. There was some things Aaron needed to either sign off on or attest to, but that should, I'm hoping, by the end of the week, be signed, sealed, delivered, wrapped up with a nice bow on it, and we can get that to all of our state partners which will get the gears back turning on, at this point, a variety of things we've got going with the state that they will not act on until we have that in with them, because it is a condition of the grant agreements.
Awesome.
All right, that's it for the wastewater project tonight. Next up is the streetscape project. There's no updates here this evening. Following the meeting we had with Bethany, she and I are still kind of kicking the tires on some various ideas or other avenues to potentially get funding on. So we'll continue to work with that, and then at some point in the hopefully not too distant future, bring back some additional information to the board on kind of next steps there. But again, at this point, it's tracking down what those other opportunities are for funding, and then we can make that decision about, how to move forward with the project as we discussed last time. Water system repairs, item C. So I don't know if folks have noticed this or not, but even on bright, sunny, dry days, there's water coming out of the driveway to the center cemetery. Anybody notice that?
Yeah. And in the winter
Yes,
as well.
actually,
Yes.
I
In the
did
winter,
notice
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that was investigated, and there is a small leak in the system there, and that is where the water is coming from. Mark has determined that. It's not big enough that it's raising any red flags or causing any pressure issues in the center, but it is a leak. And so Mark is working to get a subcontractor in there to do the digging and the repair work. At the same time that we do that, because we're going to have to shut off that leg of the system for hopefully no more than a few hours, we're also going to get the replacement hydrant in at the rec center. Okay. So Mark is working to organize that scope of work right now. Hopefully that's something that we can move on within the next couple of weeks, few weeks at the most.
Awesome.
Is that something?
Go on.
Is that something that needs to be like a, what do they call, RFP, like sent out multiple subcontractors?
Not for the scope of this within the water system, no. I don't think it rises to the purchasing limit. I will double check with Mark though.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I was always worried about it. Again, I drive past here all the time, and in the winter, you see, I worry about ice because people speed through town, and if you're going into the town and there's ice on the road from that water,
Yep.
I always thought that was a hazard.
Yeah. It was one of those things where I kept seeing it, and I finally asked Mark and Scott, like, am I crazy?
They did culvert repair on it, or rather, remember they did dig out a culvert and put new stone in. So I presumed they had identified, but it sounds like maybe there's something more to it.
So anyway, that's the secret of the water on the driveway to the cemetery. So that's getting moved on, and again, at the same time they do that, they will replace that hydrant at the rec center since they have to shut the water off to that leg anyway. Mm-hmm. So that's pending. That's it for the water system repairs. Last up is just general updates. The road crew vacancy, we've had some interest expressed by a few different folks. Mark and Scott are kind of doing some due diligence there. I do expect that the next action we'll have as a board is to schedule interviews or an interview. At this point, there's no action for the board until we kind of get the high sign from Mark and Scott through their due diligence. So no hires, no interviews yet, but I expect that will come soon.
I had a question about road stuff.
Yep.
I was wondering, Dave's been grading up on Hill West, and he's doing a good job. But we were talking about this idea of getting him trained somehow, and it seemed to be a lot of blocks to that process. And I was wondering the other day, what if we contracted one of our neighboring towns who have, experienced graders and much larger town crews, if they could come and teach him for a week or however long it would take.
Yeah, I think one of the things with training that we run into with that kind of framework is that my understanding is, talking with the road crew, is that you only have one person in the grader.
I know.
And so as far as training goes, it's somebody kind of behind, kind of watching you do a section and then coming up and giving you pointers.
Yeah.
I mean, I can certainly ask Mark and Scott, hey, what about this?
Yeah, I was
because it does seem to be kind of like that class doesn't work for these reasons, that outlet doesn't work for those reasons. But yeah, we can certainly ask him.
okay.
So to that point, the grading, they might have finished the grading today. I'm not sure. I know they were out doing the work today. If they're not done, they're almost done. And I believe they're almost all done with the roadside mowing. They might have finished that up today as well. I do not know if that was finished, but both of those should be done by now or this week. As everyone's aware, the prolonged rainy weather in May really kind of put that work behind schedule. But they are doing the final passes now with the chloride, so that should be finished up. That's it for updates on Public Works. Anybody have anything else for Public Works or any questions they want to pass along to Mark or Scott?
Nope, I'm good.
All right, and I should say just from the get-go, didn't say it earlier, but Mark can't be here this evening because he's trying to finish up getting some work done on the farm that he needs to get done before the rains come back, and Leanne is out of town. So that's why it's just the three of us tonight. With that, let's go to visitors. We don't have anybody here in the room with us, so we'll start on the screen, and I'm going to go just kind of in the order that I see folks on my screen. So, Roberta, you're up. Anything for visitors?
No, nothing that I haven't already said before.
Okay, thanks, Roberta. Next up, we've got Ed Deptula. Feel free to come off mute if you've got something for visitors. So once again, Ed, if you've got something for visitors, oh, I see you come off mute. Go ahead.
Excuse me, I lost my unmute button.
No problem.
Can you? Oh, you can hear me.
Yep.
I'm only concerned about the interested party policy and that the board adheres to it.
Just to clarify, is this the interested party or the conflict of interest policy related to recusals?
I'm sorry. I'll read the title of it. Town of Montgomery Policy on Conflict of Interest.
Yep. Yeah. Yep. So this was raised in some past discussions, raised again. I'm trying to pull up the document here. So there is a part of the policy which, pulling it up now, part of the policy which looks at specific provisions. Oh, I'm sorry, it's B, recusal from official action. The policy outlines conflicts of interest, identifying them, making them public, and actions around them by municipal officials. Where's the line I'm looking for? Under disclosure, item 2, the last sentence of disclosure reads, in such cases, the officer shall not sit with the remaining members of the public body nor be included in any deliberations other than the extent that all applicants' members of the public are included. So I think the issue that's being raised here, if I understand it correctly, Ed, is that when there is an executive session and there is a member of the body that has recused themselves from the matter, that they physically remove themselves from the room. In other cases, such as Leanne's recusal around issues with the wastewater system, those discussions happen in the open session. The public can be here. She's not been asked to leave the room. During the complaint that Mr. Deptula brought, there was an executive session. Dan had recused himself from that matter because he had a number of potential conflicts around it that were identified. He did not physically remove himself from the room during the first executive session where that was discussed. I will note that during the second executive session where the board deliberated on the complaint, Dan did leave the room. He was out with his son and his wife in the hallway. But that is a point that's been raised and identified by Ed. It is part of the policy, which, frankly, I think we had neglected to remember. So I do think it is important to just point out, as a matter of process, that when there is a conflict or a potential conflict identified, if there is an executive session that is held regarding that, the member should physically remove themselves from the room because it is not something that the general public would be party to. Ed, is that a fair summation of what you conveyed by email?
Well, I always find it awkward that a town citizen should try to clarify for you as the board what the town policy is. And a town policy is very important to understand, is based on state statute. So state statute formed the town policy.
Understood.
Some towns had the help of Vermont League of Town and Cities, and some of them took their blueprint and just ran with that rather than writing their own. So, and this is the second time this happened that I'm experiencing this, and I'm at the environmental court now with one of your DRB members violating the same policy. The policy is literate. It's not. It doesn't seem to be ambiguous to me. It's clear. We all know about executive sessions. These are not a mystery. They've been going on for decades. And if you look at an executive session, it's limited to only the people that are need to be there. And statute does allow their assistants to be there. So if they're having some kind of I don't know what they might have for an assistant, but the statute allows it. The statute doesn't allow for a recused party to join them in the executive session, whether it's in a room or wherever you want to deliberate. And if the executive session is done with the public there, it's not an executive session. If the executive session is done with recused members to that matter sitting there, it's not an executive session. You tainted the whole thing, and the DRB did the same thing. And I'm over there spending time, effort, and at the environmental board to straighten this out. So I'm looking at the town of Montgomery having a systemic problem with their conflict of interest. Now, looking at that conflict of interest, it doesn't seem to be dated back to, well, I can't tell. My copy here has a little smudge where the date is. Maybe it's 2018.
Yep, I believe it's 2018.
Okay, thank you. So what I strongly suggest, when anybody gets on these boards, especially the highest board we have in the town, is the select board, sit down and take some time to read the policies. And the conflict of interest policy is an important one. There's ethics policies. There might be other policies that I'm not aware of, and there might be more policies that you need, such as what we discussed with the American disability, a handicap type of policies. So, what I'm looking at it not from protecting the board, but I'm looking at it for protecting the town, because we always heard ignorance of the law is no excuse. The ADA policy, for example, was supposed to be in line with most communities back in 1995. The ADA came out in 1990, and they set deadlines. So it might have been even earlier in 1993. So there's no excuse for Montgomery not to have one at 2025. Now, as far as the conflict of interest policy, the state pushed that in 2017. And I think 2018 is timely that the town of Montgomery did go with the state, strong a suggestion, but law, to have a conflict of interest policy. But what good are these policies if you're not reading them, and we're all suffering from them. Now the DRB we're into, the town is into it with this, with the appeal I brought at the environmental board. Mr. Khan is a little, remains confused. He, the last time he recused himself, he seemed to do it in a in a way of that he was being polite. But even if he doesn't want to recuse himself, the town policy says the board, the remainder of the board, has to look at it from their view in the interest of the town. Could there be even an appearance of a conflict of interest? And they vote on it. So it wasn't only for Mr. Khan or Mr. Cade at the DRB to make a decision or not, So
Yeah.
I find my spending this much time on this stuff more than annoying. It makes me angry because you people seem to be sophisticated enough to bring a very expensive sewer system into the town, which, this has been going on for decades. And I've been in this town for 53 years. I heard it before. And I'm not against it, but, uh, I think you got to back up a little bit and start looking at your own ordinances. And so we're not, we're not become victims. And I could be a victim by another town citizen taking a legal action of some sort because I'm a taxpayer, and it might get into a very expensive result when somebody else is victimized one way or the other. Okay, I'm venting, but every time I see this, it doesn't seem to go away.
Yeah, understood. I will say that, again, as we said earlier, the DRB is a separate body from this, and there's kind of a firewall, I guess, in a way between us. And so I can't comment on the DRB or the actions or inactions there. As far as this body goes, yeah, there's a part of that under that sentence that we had essentially forgotten. That's all I can say.
And
I
can
think
you confirm
that,
again which part of the statute it was again?
yeah, so if you look at page, there's a line on the top of page 4, bottom of the first paragraph, which reads, in such cases, the officer shall not sit with the remaining members of the public body, nor be included in any deliberations other than to the extent that all applicants members of the public are included. So yeah, again, it's there. It's in the policy. I know I've read the policy a number of times joining the board. That was a part that, frankly, I did not remember. Again, we have these policies when we don't use them very often. Perhaps they get rusty. I agree. We should be referring back to them, brushing up on them. But that's essentially what happened there. And as far as the board, voting on a recusal for Dan, we didn't have to do that because Dan recused himself. So, going forward, we will keep that in mind, that when it does come to recusals and there is an executive session involved, the member will be asked to leave the room to the extent that it's articulated in this policy.
Well, and if you got a crowded room and it's winter, whatever's remaining of the select board can leave the room. That's a big building there. Just go somewhere. Unless you got a long deliberation. I mean, when the DRB deliberated, they deliberated for a measly 7 minutes, and they wanted us all to leave. Which I didn't understand that. But so deliberation and executive sessions are needed, but you also have to understand that you taint them, and somebody wants to challenge them. And I'm not talking about me. You gave me your decision on what I brought to you in executive session, and I'll deal with it the way I have to deal with it. But I'm talking about somebody else in the town coming in and said, "Well, what are you guys doing?" It's a taint on the actual executive session and you as a board, and it's not. And I understand this. I'm going to reiterate because I hear you, Mr. Hancock. You're over there, kind of apologetic that you're not looking at the policies, right? And I'm saying, well, when somebody's not looking at the dog ordinances and violates them, are they gonna have an excuse and come to you and say, well, I didn't look at the dog ordinance recently and I didn't know I needed a leash and I didn't know my dog, is in trouble now for biting neighbor. It's absurd. It's an absurd defense. Okay. Again, I'm irritated at the very least because the board is not looking at their own policies or doesn't have enough policies in place. And that protects the whole town, from whatever the litigation may be. Okay, and some of these things. Don't forget this. I'll share it with you when you have like a disability lawsuit, where the real expense that comes in is the attorney fees. Attorney fees are usually granted from the attorney representing somebody, and that could be absurd amount of money. And it's not going to benefit or support the town if they don't have a policy. It goes against you. It doesn't. It's not an excuse. It's not. It doesn't come around and say, "Well, we didn't have a policy. We didn't know." No, you had to have a policy, and by you not having a policy, you become more liable, so to speak. Okay, more culpable in what's going on in a way, right? So and so your boards don't know what to do. Your clerk might not. The only one I found in this town that seems to have an innate understanding of all policies is the town clerk. Whether she has training on it, I don't know, but she always appears to be within the parameters of the law on all these important situations, whether it be handicapped, etc. But when it comes to the other boards, I've only had good experience with two other boards, the DRB and your board, and you heard me out. Thank you.
Thanks, Ed. Do you have a question or something, or?
Mr. Depsula, quick question there. On the document that you shared, the 2018 Montgomery Conflict of Interest Policy, I think what Charlie was just referring to was on page 4 under section C, under disclosure, item number 2. Is that the clause that we were just recently discussing?
Well, at this time of the night, I'm not able to really feel that type of question. And
Okay. Well, I think just after this discussion, where my mind goes is that clause says that in the event a public officer personally represents, appears for, or negotiates in a private capacity on behalf of said parties. And I would just contend that I neither speak for, represent, appear for, or negotiate on behalf of either of my parents. That's the only point point of clarity.
I'm a layperson, as you, but you have a responsibility and an obligation to ask your town attorney if you're not sure what your own policy says. I shouldn't say your policy, but the town's policy says. And
I fully agree.
I find that remarkable that people always wing it. I'm telling you, I was a board member of the listers, and I was a constable, and I can't tell you how many times I used to call Doug DeVries and asking him, Doug, I got a question. Or I'd call the Vermont League of Town of Cities, and I'd never, if I was confused or bringing up a question like you did, I didn't wing it or ask the person sitting across from me that's bringing it to my attention as maybe a tax appealer. I said, I'll get back to you. You're bringing up a point that I might not understand. So ask the lawyer.
Okay, I appreciate that, and I think I just wanted to note that when I did review these policies, as we did discuss a number of the policies prior, both myself and the select board, when discussing the conflict of interest, it was not apparent to me, nor am I convinced that it is apparent, that I appear for, represent, or negotiate in a private capacity on behalf of these persons. So thank you for bringing that to my attention, to the board's attention, and I'll happily consult with the town attorney for clarity on that.
Thank you, Mr. Khan.
All right, we're gonna move to Everett now. Everett, I don't know if you want to wait for, gosh, name is escaping me. Kristen, yeah, we can certainly wait for Krista to join, or we can tackle this now. What's your pleasure?
Yeah, no, I can, I mean, the petition wording that she supplied is really speaks for itself. Um, and, yeah, I'm not such a fan of listening to myself talk, so, we can move on.
Okay, so just to be clear, do you want to wait for her to join before we act on this, or do you want to do this right now?
No, you can go ahead and, act on it, read it, and if there's any questions, I can answer them.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us tonight for that. So I will say there was a typo on the agenda. It says NEF. It should be NEKCUD. So as folks remember, the communication union districts were set up to assist and facilitate the rollout of broadband across Vermont. Various communications union districts were established. Montgomery is currently a member of the CUD. Northwest Fiberworks, which operates in primarily Franklin County. What we have in front of us tonight is a resolution for Montgomery to join the NEK Community Broadband, DBA NEK CV Communications Union District, or NEKCV, and then to appoint a representative to that governing board thereof. I'm going to read the resolution now. Whereas the town of Montgomery, at a meeting of the select board thereof held on June 16th, 2025, elects to apply for membership in the NEKCV Communications Union District, and NEKCV in quotations under the provisions of 30 VSA Chapter 82. And whereas the town of Montgomery confirms it will also maintain membership in the Northwest Fiberworks Communication District, and whereas the town of Montgomery has good reason to believe that the NEKCV Governing Board will approve such application, and whereas, as provided in sections 3059 and 3060 of said chapter, the legislative body of each member town shall appoint a representative and one or more alternates to the governing board of the district for one-year terms ending with an annual organizational meeting of the governing board of the district on the second Thursday in May. And whereas the select board of the town of Montgomery desires to accomplish the town's joining of the NEK Community Broadband DBA NEKCV Communications Union District, now therefore be it resolved that the select board of the town of Montgomery hereby approves joining the NEK Community Broadband DBA NEKCV Communications Union District under the provisions of 30 VSA Chapter 82. And the select board of the town of Montgomery hereby appoints the following representative and one or more alternates to the governing board of NEKCV. I'm going to pause there because we have to insert the representatives' names there in the resolution. Adopted at a regular meeting of the Montgomery Select Board, duly held 16th day of June 2025. So this resolution is for the town to join NEKCV. We will still remain a member of Northwest Fiberworks. What joining NEKCV will allow us to do is to work with that communications union district to roll out broadband in the town of Montgomery as well. There is an expectation that joining NEKCV may expedite that process, and it would be to the good and benefit of the community to join that communications union district as well, to the point of expediting the rollout of broadband in the community, which is something we've been looking to do since 2018 and 19, when this was identified as a priority in the Montgomery Thrives initiative. Everett, anything else regarding this that you want to add to that?
More specifically, so NEKCUD is going to be building a fiber line up through up to 42 to get to Alpine Haven. And so they are then able to serve those addresses in Montgomery. And it's likely that their plan to do that will result in service to those areas faster than would otherwise be the case. So there's nothing to be lost here. We remain a full-fledged member of Northwest CUD, and then we get some degree of benefit from being a member of NEKCUD. It's pretty straightforward.
Any questions on this?
So only the Alpine Haven houses get this?
Well, no. So I think the way this works is that they need to run the fiber up 242 to get to the Alpine Haven homes. In doing so, they're going to run fiber up 242, which should allow those property owners along Route 242 to hook into it.
Okay.
My understanding also is that at least one prospectus or plan that I read suggested that not just 242, but I believe portions of the Amadon Road could also be included in this. So there's a chance that some of this impact may spread outside of just the 242 corridor, but that is the initial corridor that is being considered. So essentially it's piggybacking on the work to get to the Alpine Haven homes in question.
Are there any obligations? Oh, sorry, and thank you. Are there any obligations to the town of Montgomery if we do become a member of the NEK Community Broadband, besides just the benefit of fiber optic service?
I believe the obligation we have is to appoint somebody to the board. To my understanding, there are no dues or other, financial obligations in joining the Communications Union District. Similarly to FiberWorks, we don't pay for that, other than our tax dollars. But as a municipality, we don't pay for that. So Everett, am I correct in understanding that you're willing to serve as the representative to NEKCV?
Yeah, having brought this before the board, I suppose I should do that.
All right, thanks, Everett. All right, if there's no more questions, then what I would look for is a motion to approve the resolution approving the town joining NEK Community Broadband, DBA, NEKCV Communications Union District.
You gotta say that again.
Yep. So what I would look for is a motion from the board to approve the resolution approving the town joining NEK Community Broadband, DBA, NEKCV Communications Union District,
Okay.
and appointing Everett McGinley as the municipal representative to said body.
In lieu of the discussion that we had and my interest in reaching out to the attorney about a conflict of interest policy, since I own a property on 242, I'll probably abstain from voting on this out of the fear of a perceived conflict of interest with access to it.
I really don't believe you have to do that. Similar to you don't abstain from approving a tax rate. We all pay the tax rate, I understand what you're saying. So if you do abstain, then we cannot execute this tonight, which is fine. And I'm not pushing you to not abstain. I just do think that there are certain things where we all are either impacted or benefit from decisions that the board makes, but it doesn't necessarily show a conflict of interest. But that being said, if you would like to abstain from this, we can table this until the next meeting.
Especially since I have an
So we can get the minutes.
Okay.
Recording in progress.
Is it my understanding that Dan is recusing himself because he's going to benefit as many other people will benefit from this new service?
Almost there.
Yeah.
What?
Yes.
You
Yes,
you
there
have
we
the
go. I
file?
found
Okay,
it.
cool. All right. Well, we'll call the meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Montgomery Selectboard. Today is Monday, June 16th. It is 6:32 p.m. First order of business, as always, is to review and make any changes to the agenda. Does anybody have any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Nope.
Well, if the service is only specific to you, you have a grounds to recuse, but if the service is providing service to many people in the town, you have no basis for recusal.
Look at Dan, this is in your court. If you
Yeah.
if you want to recuse yourself from this, you can also just abstain from voting on it.
Yeah, I think, sorry, that's, I do, sorry, intend to abstain. If I misspoke, I intend to abstain from this vote as I, figure it out.
Okay.
And thank you, Mr. Steptoe, for the clarity there.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you guys need a lot of work on conflict of interest. Thank you.
So given that we only have a 3-member board this evening, we would be unable, actually, there's two of us, we can have them, okay, yeah.
Or the majority
I take
here.
that back. My mental math at 7:22 on a Monday is failing me. That math is not mathing, but the math will math if we do this, right? So then, I would make a motion that we approve the resolution, for the town to join NEK Community Broadband, DVA, NEK CV Communications Union District, and appoint Everett McGinley as the municipal representative to said body. Is there a second to that motion?
I will say.
We have a second from Suzanne. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? It's one abstention, so the motion is approved. 2-0, 1 abstention. All right, so that takes us through visitors. I don't see anybody else on. So that brings us to old business, town hall committee. There's no representative from the committee here this evening, so we will table that item and carry it over to the next meeting, should it be warranted. Item B under old business, the single audit update. As was mentioned earlier in the meeting, we do finally have a draft of the single audit. It is in Erin's hands. She was reviewing it today. My understanding and talking with her is that there's some administrative things she needs to review and sign off on there, but by the end of the week, this should be signed, sealed, delivered. We can get it to our state partners, which will then put us back in compliance with various grant conditions so that we can get rolling on a slew of reimbursements against said grants. So good news all around. That brings us to old business, onto new business. Item A is we just acted on, that is the Montgomery petition to join the NEK Communications Union District. Item B is just a point of information for the board to be aware that the town did receive notice that the DRB ruling is being appealed to the environmental court. This board has no action to take on that, or really anything to discuss tonight. It's just being offered for a point of information to the board. Since it has been a topic of conversation in past meetings that appeal was filed. The municipal attorney is keeping tabs on it, but is not primed to take any action, nor is he directed to take any action. Generally speaking, when it comes to DRB appeals, as far as the select board is involved, we essentially don't have a dog in that fight, and so we're not there to essentially lobby for either side of it. The one thing that we have done in the past with DRB appeals, which is my understanding standard practice going back, is to keep an eye on them. So to inform ourselves, should there be any part of said process which could essentially create a novel ruling as it applies to our zoning bylaws. So essentially, if part of an appeal process would change our interpretation of our bylaws, that is something that would impact our bylaws and the community as a whole. And at that point, the select board might opt for the community to step in. At this point, we're not there yet. Again, our attorney hasn't been directed to do anything other than just keep tabs on what's going on. So that's it, just a point of information, since that has been a topic of conversation, that appeal was launched. Next up, under new business, item C, assistant municipal clerk appointments. So Erin and Liz have a candidate that they have interviewed and vetted that they would like to advance to the board. This is an individual named Kelly Stauber. She is currently an assistant clerk working in Belvedere. So she would tag team both communities part-time, filling the role here. Liz and Erin both speak very highly of her and would like to advance her candidacy to the board. So the next step there would be to have an interview with the candidate. So what I'd like to ask tonight of board members is, are either one of you willing to sit in on an interview with the candidate? If both of you are, we can certainly do that as well. If it is more than two of us, it will be a scheduled or warned meeting of the board, since it's a quorum, which we can totally do. I just want to know going into it how we're going to want to handle it. So do one or either of you want to sit in on an interview if we schedule one for later this week? Yeah.
My schedule's pretty tight. It would depend when it is.
Okay.
Can you just shoot an email out to the board and just like two people who, pending Kelly's availability?
Yeah.
To see who's available for that time, and we have.
Yep. And again, this was me just asking interest.
I mean, I will,
If you're both interested, okay.
but I don't need to.
Well, knowing that, I will reach out to Kelly and find a time that works for her, and I will get back to the board with that. And then, moving forward again, if this is a two-person interview, it will not be warned as a meeting. If 3 or more of us end up there, we will warn it as a special meeting. That's it for the assistant municipal clerk appointment. Sounds like we have a good candidate. They're really psyched about her. It seems like it will work in terms of her availability, in terms of what they need and what they're looking for in the office. If there's nothing else on item C, we'll move on to item D. This is a Conservation Commission appointment. This is to fill the vacancy left by Sue Baker, term expiring in 2028. The Conservation Commission has advanced a candidate they would like to see on the board, Cliff Lewis. So hearing that, I will open nominations to fill the seat left by Sue Baker on the Conservation Commission, term expiring in 2028. Are there any nominations?
We know how to spell lose.
Loos. I remember. Yep. Where did this come from? Oh, what is that? All right, so any nominations to fill the vacancy? Yes, and he does want to do it. Did see him at Hannaford's the other day, and he is ready and willing. All right, we have a nomination of Cliff Lewis to fill the vacant seat. Any other nominations? Hearing none, we will close nominations. All those in favor of Cliff Lewis filling the vacant seat on the Conservation Commission left by Sue Baker, term expiring in 2028, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye.
I think he nominated Tangled over there.
I am unfortunately an inanimate princess, well, certainly colorful, is not eligible to serve on the Conservation Commission.
That was a 3-0, we all approved.
Did we actually vote?
Yeah, we did.
We did, okay, I wasn't sure, I got confused by the princess. All right, great, well, you have appointed Cliff Lewis to the Conservation Commission, and I will let him know that his appointment is the final list.
Congrats, Cliff.
New business, item E, lister appointment, we're gonna have to carry this one over because we don't have any candidates for review this evening. Which brings us to liquor and tobacco licenses. The only license before us this evening is Cafe Oma. This is a first and third class license. Is there a motion to approve Cafe Oma's first and third class license?
I'll motion to approve Cafe Oma's first and third class license.
A motion from Dan, is there a second?
I'll say.
We have a second from Suzanne. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving Cafe Oma's first and third class license, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries, and you've approved the first and third class licenses for Cafe Oma. We have no fleet permits tonight for review, so that brings us through our agenda. So a motion to adjourn would be in order.
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Thanks, Suzanne. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Dan. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of adjournment, please signify by saying aye or raising your hand. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries, and we stand in adjournment.